Now, I first would like to comment on Hilmi Ziya Ülken. Now, Hilmi Ziya Ülken was born in 1901. And that is just the beginning of 20th century. Actually, Ziyaeddin Fahri Fındıkoğlu was also born the same year. This is a coincidence. Indeed, it's an interesting coincidence. These two sociologists, the second generation, I would say, the first generation being Ziya Gökalp and Prince Bahattin, this second generation, Hilmi Ziya Ülken and Ziyaeddin Fahri Fındıkoğlu, they are born in the same year. And interestingly, they died in the same year, 1974. So that is also coincidence. And these two sociologists, both working in Istanbul University, in two different faculties, actually. One in the faculty, Hilmi Ziya Ülken was, most of his life, later towards the end of his life, his last 10 years was in Ankara Theology School, but before that, he was in Istanbul University, Faculty of Literature, Department of Sociology. That was really where he, most of the time, he lectured, he wrote his articles, he wrote his book when he was in the Sociology of Department of Istanbul University Literature Faculty. Whereas Ziyaeddin Fahri Fındıkoğlu was in another faculty of Istanbul University, which is the Faculty of Economics. I will come back to that. Now, for the time being, I should continue with Hilmi Ziya Ülken. Now, Hilmi Ziya Ülken is a very prolific writer. Prolific, productive, very productive. Something like 70 books, something like so many articles in French and in Turkish, and many articles again in Turkish journals, newspapers. Some of these journals actually are published himself. He is the editor of those journals. So when you count the number of publications, all kinds of publications, newspaper, article, books, all of them, when you count them, something 1,243, something like that, 43 publications. And now I call this man very productive. Don't think so. You will also say that he is very productive. Okay, now his life actually, as I said, he is born in 1901, and he graduated from an Ottoman lycée. And the Ottoman lycée was called at that time Sultani. Sultani. It was the school that he was graduated was Istanbul Sultani, and Sultani in Istanbul. There were some other sultanis in several other provinces. For example, Ziya Gökalp attended school in Diyarbakır, a branch of these schools that was in Diyarbakır. But Ziya Ülken attended them in Istanbul. And then he finished Maltepe University in 1921. Okay, when he was 17 years old in 1918, he finished lycée, so Sultani, and then he started Mektebi Mülkiye. Mektebi Mülkiye is the beginning of Ankara University Faculty of Political Science. It was originally political science and law and actually Ankara University's social sciences branch or side of the university. The first, it was established in Istanbul, and then this school that Hilmi Ziya Ülken graduated, Mektebi Mülkiye, moved to Ankara in 1925, and it became Faculty of Political Science of Ankara University. Ankara University was established. I was just saying that Hilmi Ziya Ülken also finished this Mektebi Mülkiye. It's a kind of university or perhaps pre-university after Sultani, before full-blown university, because it became a faculty of the university only after 1925, when it moved from Istanbul to Ankara. Okay. Then he went to Darul Fünun Osmani, Darul Fünun. Okay, that was the only university in Ottoman Empire, Darul Fünun of Osmani, Istanbul. So it became Istanbul University later. And Hilmi Ziya Ülken, after Mektebi Mülkiye, went to Darul Fünun Sultani in 1921 and studied there history of philosophy, sociology, and several other fields. Now, by 1930s, he started being a young sociologist, actually, and he wrote his first book in Turkish, Türk Tefekkür Tarihi. And this is a very important book from my point of view, and being written in 1930s, 1932, 33, or some sources say it is 1933, 34. And I will go into that in a minute. Anyway, I will continue. Türk Tefekkür Tarihi, history of Turkish thought. Now, history of Turkish thought was written and published as 2 volumes. And Atatürk read this book. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk read this book and liked it very much and advised the university, now at that time it became Istanbul University, advised the university to send Hilmi Ziya Ülken to Berlin for postgraduate study, postdoc. We call it postdoc these days, postgraduate study. And he went there and he continued his studies. He came back and joined again Istanbul University. Now, I have open in front of me this Turkish, the history of Turkish thought. It is made up of, now, first, there's an introduction. It's called, you will see that, Medhal. Medhal is introduction. And in this Medhal, the introduction, he talks about, pagan Turkish thought, pagan times, pre-Islamic, Tengri, or Central Asian thought. And second period is Islamic Turkish thought during the Islamic period after Turks joined Islam. And the third section of the book is modern period, Turkish thought in the modern period. Now, in pagan, pre-Islamic Turkish thought, he starts with first collective thought, social collective thought, and there he deals with Turkish cosmogony, how cosmos, how pre-Islamic Turkish thought visualized creation of the universe, and mythology, pre-Islamic mythology, and pre-Islamic philosophy, Turkish philosophy, and also he has a section about technical thought, technology, and pre-Islamic, in the pre-Islamic time, technology. What type of technology they used? Horses did they have, or did they have at that time plowing the land, or only hunting, gathering, whatever, all that technology. And then he goes into what were the influences on this pagan Turkish thought in the pagan period, pre-Islamic period. And there he goes Indo-European influences, Chinese influences in Chinese Turkestan, where this Greek and Buddhist synthesis. There was a Greek and Buddhist synthesis. Why Greek? Because of the great Alexander. Great Alexander went on until up to Turkmenistan in China, up to that point. So there was a synthesis of this Greek thought and Buddhist Chinese thought, so that influenced Turkish thought in the Islamic period. And then Manichaeism, Judaism, and Christianity. Now, in the second part, he goes into Islamic period, Islamic Turkish thought, and then it starts with sciences which are rational, sciences which are religious, sciences. He goes into all these, and he goes into mysticism. Then he goes into Turkish philosophy. He talks about Farabi and Ibn Sina. And then he comes to the Selçuk period from 11th century to 14th century, where he talks about Nizam al-Mulk, for example, one of the founders of Turkish political theory, political administrative theory, perhaps we can say political administrative theory. He talked about Yusuf Hasajib and others. And then in terms of tasawwuf, mysticism, in terms of mysticism, he talks about, for example, from European mysticism, Muhyiddin Arabi, he talks about Muhyiddin Arabi and Sadreddin Konevi. So Sadreddin Konyavi. So obviously Sadreddin went from Konya to European Islamic Cordoba, and mostly they were in Cordoba. Now this is in the western part of Islamic empire, Islamic society. In the eastern, he calls that Mashriq, and Maghrib is western, as you know. Mashriq is eastern. Now in Mashriq, he talks about Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi, who is in Konya actually, and that is in terms of geography at the Selçuk period. We have to talk in those terms, and then he goes into Ahilik and other material. This is really in the pre-modern part of it is very rich indeed. This book is many times published. Okay, now I will go back to other books that he has written. Really, as I said, he has written 3 books. And for example, one of his books that he has written before this Tefekkür Tarihi is Turkish thought is Ethics of Love, for example. Or another book that is he wrote around this time is Humanitarian Patriotism, patriotism and nationalism, and these are ideologies that are being discussed during 1930s. And then he has in 1935 Anthology of Turkish Philosophers. And then again in the same year, he has Introduction to the Study of Turkish Mysticism. Yani very productive these years, 31, 33, 34, 35. And then in 1942, he writes a book on Ziya Gökalp, the founder of sociology, and the department that he is in Istanbul University, Ziya Gökalp. And then in 1946, he writes his book on Islamic thought, İslam düşüncesi, Islamic thought in 1946. But in the same year, 1946, he also writes his book on ethics, morality. And in 1948, he writes Consciousness of Nation and History. Can you imagine now this period, 1940s now, we are in 1940s, and Turkish Republic and a Republican society, Republican institutions are being established, and society is being shaped by these new Republican institutions. And as a sociologist, Ziya Ülken is writing books about them, writing articles in the newspapers, because he believes that sociology has a role in shaping the new structure of Turkish society. So he's continuously he is writing. For example, in 1953, he had this book, Problems of Sociology. And in 1957, he wrote Veraset ve Cemiyet. Veraset. Now, veraset is inheritance. Or veraset is also succession. Who will come, now, especially in charismatic societies or in charismatic movements, who will succeed the leader? The charismatic leader is a very important problem, very important sociological problem. Max Weber wrote about that, for example. So it seems Hilmi Ziya Ülken is also writing about this veraset and society, cemiyet, their relationship. Now, in 1958, he wrote his book, Tarihi Maddeciliğe Reddiye, Rejection of Historical Materialism. Now, this is interesting. Now, in the earlier period, Hilmi Ziya Ülken was Marxist, but it seems that by 1950s he became post-Marxist, or he wrote this book, Rejection of Historical Materialism. Actually, his intellectual development can be divided into 4 periods. The first period is 1918, his graduation from Sultani, from Lise, and 1933, his writing of this book, Türk Tefekkür Tarihi, or History of Turkish Thought. Now, in this period, he is actually a teacher also, while he's also attending his university, but also he's teacher in various high schools. And he's a member of Anatolia-centered movements, social movements. He's Anatolia-centered social movements. And in this, he is mostly influenced by Ziya Gökalp. Ziya Gökalp's books on, as you remember, Turkification, modernization, and westernization, or nationalization, Turkification. All his books is being read by Hilmi Ziya Ülken'e and commented upon them, and adaptations are made into 1930s. And then his second period is 1933-1942. Now, the second period is 1933-42. Now, this is post-university reform period. In 1933, Istanbul Darülfünun Osmani was closed, and it is reopened as Istanbul University. So this is called, in a series of reforms of the university, this is one of the first university reforms. So in 1933, new university is named, Darülfünun is named as Istanbul University, and he became a member of it in this reform period. And he mostly in this period focused on Western philosophy, and actually he published his Türk Tefekkür Tarihi during this time, 33, 34, or 32, 3. Now, the third period is 1942, 1960. Now, this is the period he was the member of Sociology department in Istanbul University, the Faculty of Literature, and actually most of it he was department head of the chairman of the Department of Sociology, and he published journals and books. He was very productive during this period, 1942, 1960, full-blown sociologist. In 1960, there was another university reform, and 147 university professors, most of them were professors, even some of them were ordinarius professors, very advanced level professors. 147 were either görevlerinden affedilme, taken from their jobs to be free from their jobs or from their duties in the university, but some others are relocated into another university. Now, Hilmi Ziya Ülken is in the second category. He was relocated to Ankara University in 1960, Ankara University Faculty of Theology. So from 1960 until 1974, his death actually, and his, until 1973, where he left the university. I mean, he retired from the university, and 1 year later, in 1974, he died. Now, so period 1960-1974 period, most of it in Ankara University Theology faculty. He also continued writing his books. For example, some of these books, for example, let me mention this book, History of Contemporary Thought, Türkiye'de Çağdaş Düşünce Tarihi. Now, that is written in this period, published in 1966, when he was in the theology faculty, or philosophy of education in 1967. This also was written when he was there. But most important, one of his philosophical foundational books, Varlık ve Oluş. Varlık ve Oluş. Existence and being, existence and becoming. And this is like, for example, Heidegger has a book, Being and Time, or Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, Being and Nothingness, And these are their great books. Now, Hilmi Ziya Ülken, magnum opus, I would say, is this Varlık ve Oluş. Existence and becoming, That's, but it is actually beyond our study for the time being. It is mostly a philosophical book. Now, in this fifth week material, in the contents period, I put an article by Ayhan Vergili. The title of the book is A Turkish Sociologist as a Bridge. A Turkish Sociologist as a Bridge, köprü. Turkish Sociologist being a bridge between the Ottoman state, Ottoman society, and Republican Turkish society. Hilmi Ziya Ülken, he conceptualized Hilmi Ziya Ülken as a bridging sociologist. For example, as we will see in the following weeks, for example, we qualify Mehmet Kray as the sociologist of transition. Actually, Turkish society is being in a process of continuous transition. In the case of Mehmet Kray, transition. I call myself also a sociologist of change and transition and modernization, development, underdevelopment. Anyway, we will come to that. Okay, now, sociologist as a bridge. This is Ayhan Vergili's conceptualization of Hilmi Ziya Ülken as a sociologist. Now, in this article, Ayhan Vergili thinks that Ülken is trying to sociologically conceptualize radical reforms of the Atatürk period, from 1923 to the end of 40s, or the case of Atatürk, to up to 38, but it continued perhaps after 1938. So he is aware that this is a top-down project. So he is trying to bring an interpretation from instead of top-down, from below to up, from below to top. From below, that's from society to the state, to the elites, radical reformers. So reforms are coming from radical elites and state down to society, and sociologist is trying to conceptualize the influences or transformative consequences of these reforms at the societal level, and by writing books and articles informing the elite, the educated elite, that what's happening down at the societal level. So I think I agree with Ayhan Vergili and Ülken's is trying to make a synthesis, actually, these radical reforms and societal memory that's coming from the past and from traditions, from religion, and the 1930s religious and secular divide, or religion and secularism conflict. So he's actually trying to ease this conflict, this confrontation between secular reforms and traditional societal religious practices, structures, tendencies, dispositions. How the two are coming together. Actually, that is the job of a sociologist, indeed, and that is he's doing his job very well indeed. Now, Ülken also says that, for example, he lists here the newspapers he writes his articles. They are some of names are Tasviri Efkar, for example, description of ideas. The name Tan, Vatan, Ulus, Yeni Sabah. These are the newspaper time, and he's writing articles, doing what I said, interpretation of reforms that's going on from state to society level. And for example, in 1953, he wrote on labor migration in Turkey. Labor migration. 1950 is the beginning of labor migration in Turkey. From Anatolian cities and villages, people started coming to metropolitan centers, to Istanbul, to Izmir, to and some of them went to southern Dersin, Adana, or more interior Bursa. All these cities started having migration, and in around this time, at the same time, in 1953, he also wrote about earlier, actually, about slums, gecekondu. He thought that gecekondu development in the periphery of these cities, peripheries of these cities are being gecekondu housing, squatter housing, houses built overnight, sprawling, expanding metropolis. When he was in Istanbul, he saw the trends. And he talked about them.